The annals of the Scottish Wars of Independence are filled with epic battles, political betrayals, and the legendary figures of kings and rebels. Yet to miss the grand narrative of Robert the Bruce and William Wallace, there is a singular story of Isabella MacDuff, Countess of Buchan, a woman who, in a moment of exceptional personal courage, stepped out of the shadows to alter the course of history. Her act of defiance crowning an outlawed king was not merely symbolic, it was a profound assertion of national tradition over foreign law and personal loyalty over marital obligation. For this treasonous act, she would suffer a punishment of unparalleled cruelty, a period of prolonged torment in an iron cage that has since become a powerful, if grim, symbol of sacrifice. This video provides a comprehensive examination of Isabella MacDuff's life, focusing on her defining role in the 1306 coronation of Robert the Bruce, the profound symbolic weight of her actions, and the ruthless punishment inflicted upon her by King Edward I of England. By contextualising her story within the bitter Comyn-Bruce rivalry and the broader political landscape, we will distinguish between established historical facts and romanticised portrayals, clarifying her enduring legacy as a Scottish heroine and martyr. The political turmoil that defined Isabella MacDuff's life began long before her defining moment at Scone. The Scottish throne became vacant in 1290 with the death of Margaret, the Maid of Norway, the last direct descendant of the Canmore dynasty. This dynastic crisis, known as the Great Cause, prompted 13 competitors to lay claim to the Scottish crown, most notably Robert Bruce of Annandale, the grandfather of the future king, and John Balliol. The Comyn family, a powerful clan of Norman origin that had long dominated Scottish politics, threw its weight behind Balliol, who was the brother-in-law of their patriarch, John III Comyn, the Black Comyn. With no clear legal path forward, the Scottish nobles sought the arbitration of King Edward I of England. Edward, however, had his own ambitions. Viewing himself as the feudal overlord of Scotland, he ultimately chose Balliol as the strongest claimant in terms of feudal law, likely because he saw him as a more pliable and compliant puppet king. This intervention cemented the great political division that would define the next half-century. A bitter rivalry between the House of Bruce and the House of Comyn. For Robert Bruce to ever claim the throne, he would have to secure the cooperation of the Comyn clan by ensuring their destruction. Within this tangled web of rivalries, Isabella MacDuff found herself in a position of immense personal and political conflict. As the daughter of the Earl of Fife, she belonged to a lineage that held a profound and ancient hereditary right to the Scottish crown. The Earls of Fife were the highest-ranking native Scottish nobles and possessed the unique right to crown the King of the Scots. However, her marriage, like a strategic alliance arranged by Edward I, was to John Comyn, the third Earl of Buchan. This union placed her at the heart of the Comyn family, the principal rivals and hereditary enemies of the Bruces. Their life was a study in conflicting loyalties, and the stage was set for a moment of monumental decision. The moment came on February the 10th, 1306, inside Greyfriars Kirk in Dumfries. Robert the Bruce had arranged a meeting with his political rival, John the Red Comyn, a cousin of Isabella's husband, in an attempt to discuss their differences. The two men openly despised each other, and their negotiations quickly broke down. The encounter escalated into a violent confrontation, with Bruce drawing a dagger and stabbing Comyn in front of the high altar of the church. The murder of Comyn, a sacrilegious act committed on holy ground, instantly transformed Robert the Bruce into an outlaw in the eyes of both God and man. This desperate preemptive strike by Bruce eliminated his last credible rival for the Scottish throne. The assassination of John the Red Comyn, Lord of Badenoch, ignited open rebellion and forced Bruce to act decisively and without delay. With the traditional sanctioned path to the throne no longer an option, Bruce's only recourse was to immediately seize power through a defiant coronation and rally his supporters. This sudden, forced action created the very opportunity that would make Isabella's subsequent act so impactful that it necessitated a validating, unexpected endorsement for a king who at that moment had no legal standing. The political stakes had been raised exponentially by the violence, creating the perfect crucible for the dramatic intervention and its lasting consequences. In the wake of John Comyn's murder, Robert the Bruce moved with remarkable speed to consolidate his position. 6 weeks later, on March the 25th, 1306, he was inaugurated as King of Scots at Scone, the traditional coronation site. Scone Abbey had long held the Stone of Scone, or Stone of Destiny, upon which Scottish kings were crowned for centuries, until Edward I had stolen it in 1296. It forced Bruce's supporters to use a makeshift circlet of gold in place of the stolen crown. The ceremony was a solemn affair attended by bishops and earls. Still, it lacked the presence of the one person whose role was essential for a legitimate coronation, a representative of the MacDuff clan. The hereditary right of the Earl of Fife to enthrone Scottish kings was a matter of deep historical and symbolic significance. The MacDuff chiefs were seen as the capitals of the lore of the clan Macduff. Their participation was considered to be a sanction of the king's power by the Scottish people themselves. On the day of the first coronation, the current Earl of Fife, Duncan Macduff, was a minor and held in England as a ward of Edward I, making him unable to perform his hereditary duty. Isabella MacDuff, his sister, was a woman of immense personal courage and conviction. Defying her husband, who was a close relative of the murdered Comyn and a local supporter of Edward I, she made a monumentous journey. She rode at breakneck speed to Scone to perform her brother's ceremonial role on his behalf, and according to one account, she had even taken her husband's most valuable knights, war horses, and driven them relentlessly to get to Scone. This act would have been a profound insult to her husband. Isabella arrived a day late, but so immense was the symbolic importance of her presence that Bruce agreed to stage the entire ceremony again. On March the 26th, 1306, in a second hastily arranged coronation, Isabella MacDuff lifted the golden circlet once more and placed it upon the brow of Robert the Bruce, completing the ancient ritual. This repetition of the coronation ceremony was a masterpiece of political and cultural manoeuvring. It transformed Robert the Bruce from a simple rebel to a divinely and traditionally sanctioned monarch. The first ceremony, while defiant, like the key symbol of the stolen Stone of Destiny. Isabella's action, however, substituted the physical stone with the ancient living authority of a bloodline, the Macduff clan. By having a Macduff place the circlet on his head, Bruce was signalling that his claim was rooted not in English-imposed feudal law, but in the immutable pre-feudal traditions of the Scottish people. This shift was a far more potent and effective form of legitimation for a rebellious nation. Her act of defiance provided the moral and ancestral authority that the stolen Stone of Destiny could not, serving as a mighty rallying cry for those who felt disenfranchised by English rule and the Balliol-Comyn faction. By actively participating, Isabella publicly renounced her husband's family and the authority of Edward I, effectively sealing her fate. The triumph of the double coronation was short-lived. Edward I, enraged by Bruce's open rebellion and the murder of his loyal subject, declared Robert an outlaw and sent forces to hunt him down. Bruce's army was handily defeated in a string of battles during the summer of 1306, most notably at the Battle of Methven in June. Recognising the imminent danger, Bruce sent his family and key supporters north to what he hoped would be safety. This party included his wife Elizabeth de Burgh, his young daughter Marjorie, his sisters Christina and Mary, and Isabella MacDuff, who had since joined the royal entourage. They were to escape to Orkney and sail to Norway, where Bruce's other sister, Isabel, was living as a widowed queen. Unfortunately, the royal party's flight was betrayed by William II, the Earl of Ross, who handed them over to the English. This capture placed these noble women at the mercy of Edward I, a king known for his brutal and merciless punishments for what he considered treasonous acts. Edward's treatment of the captured women was not merely a random act of cruelty, but a calculated policy of political manipulation, a means of punishing Robert the Bruce by inflicting suffering upon his loved ones. The punishments for the captured women varied, reflecting Edward's careful calculations. Queen Elizabeth de Burgh was placed under a form of house arrest, likely due to her father's status as a powerful Irish noble and an English ally, whom Edward did not wish to antagonise. Robert's sister Christina and his daughter Marjorie were sentenced to indefinite confinement in English convents. However, Isabella MacDuff and Bruce's sister Mary faced a far harsher fate: imprisonment in cages. The difference in their sentences demonstrates that Edward I's cruelty was directly proportional to the perceived offence against his authority. While all the women were valuable hostages, Isabella's punishment was uniquely severe because her acts of crowning Bruce had directly and publicly undermined Edward's claim to Scottish overlordship in a way the others had not. Elizabeth de Burgh's crime was being married to a rebel, which her powerful father could mitigate. Isabella, however, had performed a public, ritualistic act that validated Bruce's sovereignty, and by extension, delegitimised Edward's. Her punishment was not just about control, it was a public spectacle of revenge and a permanent warning to any who would dare follow her example. Edward I's personal fury at Isabella's actions was reflected in the unique severity of her punishment. For her part in the coronation, she was sentenced to imprisonment in a cage at Berwick Castle. Edward's specific instructions for her confinement had been preserved in historical records, revealing the full extent of his calculated cruelty. This decree had several key components: the use of a cage of stone and iron, its cross-like shape, its location out of doors and suspended from the castle walls, and most importantly, its explicit purpose of making her a public spectacle and an eternal reproach to all who pass by. The precise nature of this cage has been a subject of historical debate. Popular portrayals, often inspired by romanticised accounts, depict a small, open-air iron gibbet hanging from the keep, wholly exposed to the elements. While this interpretation captures the dramatic and symbolic cruelty of the sentence, it raises questions of feasibility, as such prolonged exposure to the brutal border's weather would likely have been lethal in a matter of months. Historically, gibbet cages of this type were typically used to display the bodies of executed criminals, allowing them to rot publicly as a warning. A more plausible historical interpretation suggests that the cage was not a free-hanging gibbet, but rather a fortified room or construction built into the castle wall, a cell with a barred or grated front that was open to public view. This arrangement would still have fulfilled Edward's core demand of making her a public spectacle, allowing passers-by to see and mock her, while also providing a modicum of shelter that would permit her to survive for 4 years. The use of the term cage could be a description of the psychological confinement and lack of privacy, rather than a literal, fully exposed structure. The contradiction in the sources about the nature of the cage reveals a more profound truth about the historical record. The dramatic suspended gibbet narrative, while possibly a literary interpretation, is a powerful metaphor for the public and a dehumanising spectacle Edward intended. The more plausible room in the wall or barred cell still fulfills the core purpose of her punishment: humiliation and public display without the immediate lethality of a true gibbet. The very existence of this debate underscores the psychological and political impact of Edward's sentence, which was so shocking and unprecedented for a woman of her noble rank that it led to conflicting and sensationalised accounts. Her physical torment was a means to an end, a carefully calculated public degradation meant to serve as a perpetual warning and a visible symbol of her family's betrayal. After 4 years of public imprisonment in the cage, Isabella's conditions of confinement were changed. By 1310, she was moved from her cell to the Carmelite friary at Berwick. The reasons for this shift were likely pragmatic rather than humanitarian. As Robert the Bruce's military campaign gained momentum, his captured female relatives, including Isabella, became increasingly valuable hostages. The English under Edward II now saw more value in keeping them alive for a potential prisoner exchange than in allowing them to die from ill treatment. The turning point in the war came with Bruce's decisive victory at the Battle of Bannockburn in June 1314. This triumph finally forced the English to negotiate. A major prisoner exchange was arranged, and in early 1315, Bruce's wife, daughter, and sisters were returned to Scotland after years in captivity. However, in the detailed records of this exchange, Isabella MacDuff is conspicuously absent. The last explicit mention of her is a reference to her being transferred in 1313. There is a strong consensus among historians that she likely died in captivity before Bannockburn, her body worn down by the trials and stress of her prolonged imprisonment. Isabella's final fate is a powerful historical silence. While the story of Robert the Bruce ends in triumph and independence, the story of his female supporters ends in suffering, isolation, and oblivion. Her absence from the record serves as a stark reminder that the glory of victory was built on the prolonged torment and sacrifice of individuals like her who paid the ultimate price for their defiance. The records are meticulous about the release of the other Bruce women. The fact that Isabella is not listed in this crucial, politically symbolic exchange is a testament to the fact that her suffering was so complete that she did not live to see the fruits of her courage. Her death in captivity, unrecorded and unmourned in the historical annals, makes her the ultimate martyr for the cause she championed. It is essential to note the historical confusion surrounding Isabella MacDuff's identity. Some popular genealogies and accounts conflate her with the late Countess of Fife, also named Isabella, who was born around 1320, married multiple times, and lived until 1389. This later Countess of Fife, who had a whole and fortunate life, is an entirely different person from the heroine of 1306. The merging of these two historical figures in some popular accounts demonstrates a cultural need to provide a happy ending for an heroic figure whose true fate was tragic. The more fortunate Isabella's life is grafted onto the story of the martyr, a process of historical romanticism that obscures the grim reality of the Wars of Independence. In conclusion, Isabella MacDuff's story is a compelling one of courage and sacrifice. A singular act of defiance performed against the backdrop of immense personal and political pressure provided crucial legitimacy for Robert the Bruce's claim to the throne. Her willingness to abandon her husband and her family's loyalty to the Comyns to uphold the ancient traditions of her own clan makes her an heroic figure in Scottish history. Despite her grim end, her story, retold in songs, plays and novels, has canonised her as a symbol of unwavering patriotism, a proud lady in a cage who refused to bend to a foreign king, and she remains a poignant reminder of the profound human cost of liberty.